Shut up and sit down.
The two things people don't know about in terms of friendship.
All right, I'm Terra Walker, and that's Ted Bauer, and this is Terra and Ted Talk. Today we're talking about relationships.
Yeah, so today we're going to tackle two things that I feel like people get real confused about with regard to relationships. So it'll probably get weaved in and out of each other, but the order supposedly is can you be friends with an employee / manager in a conventional sense? And then can you be friends with an ex? And that's probably going to be the more controversial part. So I'll just lob in on that first part. I think, and then you can go, obviously. I think it's like kind of the definition or the context of how you define friendship. Like, I don't necessarily think that managers, especially beyond a certain age when they have a family or whatever, I don't necessarily think they should be like going out drinking or like happy hours or whatever all the time with people on their team. But if you define friendship in the context of like respect, like you're supportive when they go through stuff, you check in with them, yeah, I feel like you can be friends with an employee in that context. So more like an emotionally or like just generally supportive friendship as opposed to like a social friendship, I would say is like where I kind of see the line. But what's your take on that?
I agree with you. Sorry. I have a massive burn on my arm.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
And I'm getting zinc everywhere.
Okay.
I totally agree with you on that. I think that if you're, I think that there's to some degree some good morale that can come out of you as a manager meeting up for drinks with your employees once in a while.
Right, for sure.
But I don't think that it should be. I think once you become a manager, you kind of give up that friendship. But I also don't think that means that you have to treat people you were friends with before like giant heaping piles of crap.
Right, I agree. And I also think it's like I've been at probably 5 or 6 jobs where somebody gets to a higher level and it's like the relationship almost automatically changes from where they were supportive and friendly with you, and now they feel like they have to be your quote-unquote boss, which, like, I get it psychologically to an extent, but at the same time, it's like I don't think that's really the play. There was a study probably 2015 by Francesca Gino from Harvard, who like interviewed all these managers globally, and like 60% of them said they didn't feel they had the time to be respectful to the people that worked for them. Just funny because like I don't think you need to schedule being respectful, you know? Right. Sorry, my dog is like wheezing on me.
Oh, poor puppy.
I don't think you need to schedule time to be respectful. So, but then I think it's weird because it's like, let's say you come from a team and you were one of like 6 or 8, you get promoted and you're kind of like over the team now. Yeah. Well, like you were in the foxhole with all those people, you know them, like you definitely have the ability to be like friendly, supportive, respectful to them. But I think a lot of people transition to this like boss mode, which is kind of a fallacy anyway. So yeah, I think it's possible to be friendly. I just think it's like, oh, I thought of another thing because we talked about this in that meetings episode. It's like, I honestly think managers should do this because a lot of times managers are the ones whose time is more stressed out or they have more shit on their plate, like meetings or whatever. So I think they should do a thing where like if they call a meeting for their team and they either like start it late or they run it over, it's like $1 a minute. Put that in a fund, and then at the end of the month, like you use that for happy hour or something. Because that's like a way where it's like, okay, I own accountability for like not starting these on time, not finishing these on time. So you get that, and then you also get like, oh, okay, like this is a thing that like can be an approved monthly social event that I feel comfortable being like a friend to my employees at. So I think something like that could work too.
Well, and the dynamic is going to, if you've got a peer, if you've got a friend, I mean, they
Right.
could be your friend. If you're working with somebody, and in retail, this happens a lot because retail employee jobs just kind of cycle through.
Right.
There's a lot
Right.
of a lot of turnover in retail jobs. But I think that if you're becoming the boss, you need to accept that things are going to change, and you don't get to be. I don't think you get to be their friend anymore.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely not in like a conventional friendship sense, but like you can still be supportive and respectful and all that. But I agree, like
I don't think you get to use their secrets against them.
No, and that's something that you see come up sometimes in white collar that sucks. Is like.
Well, and that's where we transition into being friends with exes as well.
Right.
Like
that is a good. There's your segue, man. There's your segue from 1 to 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like. Okay, I think I've told this story to a couple people. I would say, like, I don't remember what year it was, maybe like summer 2016. So my ex and I broke up in like March 2017 effectively, right?
Right.
So I want to say this is like summer 2016, maybe late summer 2016. We had like gone to this wedding. We were like coming back, or we had to like return the rental car, like fly back or whatever. So I remember we had been in a fight about something. I don't even remember the context at this point. That's just like what happens when you've been out of a relationship. So like even though our actual shit didn't happen for probably like 9 months, 8 months from that point, like I think it was her, it could have been me. Somebody brought up like breaking up or whatever. And so we're in this like discussion about that. And like one of the big things was like, okay, like if you get to that level, like it's obviously never going to be the same, right? And like part of the reason is, or like the first thing I think all human brains jump to is like, they know too much about me, like too much about my bullshit, too much about like the baggage or problems that I have. And then like you can become in a really vulnerable spot where it's like, I don't want to like go to this person for advice because they also know all my fucking baggage, you know?
Right.
So I think that's like an overlap with the work side of it. Is that if you were just on a team with somebody and you were real good friends for 3 years and they know a bunch of secrets about you and now they're your manager, it's like they have a professional and social ethical responsibility not to use that stuff against you. The bad managers do, and I feel like it's the same with the bad ex relationships. It's like the bad ex relationships are going to be like, oh, I know what buttons to push on this person, you know? So I guess I've probably been in like 3 long term that are like exes now. And like, I've never really had a person try to like push buttons on me, which is good because usually it's like a pretty like communication clean break, which can be awkward at its own right. But I mean, I think that's the first place human brains go to when they have an ex is they're like, oh, this person knows way too much shit about me. Yeah.
Well, and I have 2, 3 that I still talk to.
Okay. All right.
But they're not the type of people. They're just not the type of people to use secrets against you.
Right. Okay. Well, that's positive.
And so that's another thing too. And it wasn't like they weren't, and that's a big difference. They weren't volatile breakups. They were just like, we're done.
Right. For sure.
Like this is over.
Yeah, and I don't think any of mine were like volatile. I think it was like, probably the last one was like not unexpected because I'll own like the side of it that I feel like was my fault or my bad, but it's also like, I mean, obviously, like I just opened this section with the anecdote about like we were talking about it like 8-9 months before, so I'm not gonna call it unexpected, you know. But it's like I think though that's where the overlap is like, I was gonna see if there was a parallel here. I'm not sure that there is. Like one thing that I think is annoying about or harder about coming out of like a longer term ex situation is that if you had friends through their ecosystem and there has to be like a clean break on that side too. I feel like not that it was okay, maybe like 2 or 3 people that I would have classified as like really close friends, but then a couple smaller ecosystems. And I think that applies at work too, is that like by advancing certain people and leaving others where they were, you kind of like break those bonds too, where like maybe there was this team that all had each other's back or whatever, and you kind of like broke that apart too, you know? So I think it has a work context as well in that regard. Like the personal is probably a little bit more profound, but there's a work context there too.
So yeah, but we get back to it's not even like the clean, like if you've, like I've done that, I've moved up, you know, when I've had to take retail jobs to make ends meet, and I'm pretty good at jobs, so I get moved up pretty quickly. But I've completed leadership training. And so I get those roles offered pretty frequently, you know. And so but you have to be ready to say, you know, we can't be friends anymore. You have, and then so that kind of ties into like a breakup, you know, to some degree. You have to be like, well, we really just can't be friends. One of my friendships, it took us 2 years to get back to a friendship.
Oh really? You mean like in a work context?
Well, we had worked together and we had been seeing each other for ever.
So it's like a double overlap right there.
Yeah. But we worked together just fine. Even after that, we were fine with the working together. But it took about 2 years to get back around to the friendship.
For sure. And that's like, I always wonder, like, I always wonder too, like, this is going to sound profound, I guess, in a way, and I don't even mean it to, but like, it's just really weird to me about the human condition or psyche that you can spend like so much time with a person for like X amount of years, like literal years, and then like one day there can just be like a randomly clean break where it's like, okay, that's not like a facet of my life anymore. Like that shit to me is like super profound about the human condition, where like the only thing that legitimately equates to the end of a long relationship is like someone dying, you know, like that I could think of. Like, so I think that's funny is like, obviously, you know, from like all this social science research that like people in those moments like just try to push through, and it's the same with like turmoil or chaos at work. People just try to push through, like focus on their day to day. But it's just weird, like you can be with somebody for like 8-9 years, and then it's like one random day, it's like, okay, well, this is my life now. this is what I'm doing now, and like that's like the fucking human condition, and like only X amount of people, I guess, like U.S. wide, it's probably close to 1 in 2 people from like just a divorce standpoint, but obviously people that aren't married break up all the time. So it's probably like millions of people have experienced that, but I feel like there's not a lot of communal discussion about it, like how weird that can be. It's almost like the same shit, like if you get like, well, I mean, we've talked about this too, and I feel like this is like another episode or vignettes or whatever, but like it's almost like the same shit. Like you spent 8 years at some company, 6 years at some company, a bunch of shit goes south, you decide to leave, so you go to a new company. Like when you get onboarded into that new company, that's like your life is completely different. Like, yeah, maybe you have the same girlfriend, boyfriend, kids, friend circle because you're in the same city, but like your life for the majority of Monday through Friday, or if you're retail, weekends and shit too, like it's going to be completely different. And like that's why I think it sucks so much that like people don't take the onboarding experience as seriously as they could, because onboarding is like the equivalent of like, I switched schools in 4th grade and in high school, like 4th and 9th, I guess, in my K to 12 years. And like going to a new school in 4th grade is like a huge deal because people know each other from kindergarten, and it was a K through 8 school. And like, man, that stuff is hard. And like, it's the same shit like starting a new white collar, even blue collar type job is like all the people are different, the processes are different, and like we have no respect for that onboarding process. Like in general, we assign it to HR, it's all paperwork, whatever. And it's like, it's almost like when stuff changes on teams and people get promoted, even if you're in the same place. And then definitely when stuff changes with your relationships, like it's almost like literally you're like onboarding yourself a new life. Like,
well, you are.
right.
Yeah. And it's also a grief process, and that's something
Right.
else that nobody's acknowledging. Like if your friend becomes your manager, they're for all intents and purposes, they're not your friend anymore. And so there's a grieving process that and people don't handle it well.
Right.
And, then, you know, in that situation, we can go forever on this. We get back to talking about leadership versus management and how a leader is innately not going to act that way.
Right. Well, like I read this thing too. A couple of weeks ago. Like, I don't know. I'm going to pronounce it wrong because I'm not good at foreign languages. But like Andres Iniesta, the soccer player on Spain. Yeah. So like when he played his last game for Barcelona, which was this past like La Liga season, he apparently stayed at the stadium just like sitting on the field until like 2 a.m. And like you gotta understand, like he's probably been in like Barcelona youth since he was 10 and he's like 35. So it's pretty much his whole life, right?
Right.
So it's like the dude that wrote this article, I think it was on Harvard Business Review, like he was making the point that like that never happens at work. Like in most work settings, like we don't give ourselves like the space to process or reflect on what just happened, especially when it's like a larger scale change. We're kind of just expected to like move to what the new normal is going to be. And like, that's a thing that I think is like physiologically coded in human beings. Like, you know, if your mom dies, dad dies, like eventually you got to get through the days in the week that follows that. So like, you're going to have kind of like I have to just knock this out perspective or attitude on it. But it's like, I do think like, especially in a work context, when there's like chaos or a whole team changes or whatever, which happens like more than we admit, I think that like people need to be given like, whether it's a day off or like just like bring in somebody like a little bit higher than that team and be like, okay, this is an open forum, no judgment, like let's talk about what's happening, like how do you feel about this kid leading this team now or whatever. Like, I just feel like we don't have rituals or do stuff like that, and that probably, like, limits us in a work context, you know?
I think you're right. And I think to many degrees, it's pretty severely, like, if promoting somebody on a team is absolutely going to change the dynamic of that team, because the person you promoted no longer has that position on the team. And there's probably no longer that position on the team. Right? Or at least not for a little while till they fill that position. Very rarely does it happen successively like that. We hired somebody for your position so you can be. Now that's how it's supposed to work. That's why we say be replaceable.
Right.
So that you can move up and be replaceable.
Yeah.
But rarely does it happen that way. And if it happened quicker, there'd be less. I think there'd be less grief response. I think there'd be a whole lot, especially if someone was able to kind of just step right in. And we talk about filling shoes.
Yep.
And that can go both ways, or that can go for both business and you know, relationships, friendships, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, those sorts of things. Like there still needs, even if somebody fills those shoes, there still needs to be a grief point. And there still needs to be like, you need to pause and consume. And and those sorts of things, there's no time limit. And that's the other thing that irritates the crap out of me is that, I mean, yeah, if we stopped and gave everybody a minute to kind of mourn the loss of their teammate, which is really what we're all doing in any situation.
Right.
For some people, that's easier than others, because for some people, those gaps were filled more than others.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, it's like the whole thing about like, okay, we've talked about this in other contexts, but it's like the whole thing about like work is so much about execution to people. And I get it because it's like a more measurable output and everything, but like there are so many things that happen in a person's life while they're working. Like they have children, they buy homes, they get divorced, they break up with a long-term girlfriend, boyfriend, their parents die, like God forbid their kids die, you know, whatever. There's like a million possibilities. And it's like, to say that like none of those things have any impact on your potential output is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, no dude, like, even if he was estranged from his mom or whatever, no woman or guy is going to be the same like the Monday after their mom dies in a
Right.
work context. You know what I mean? So like
Right.
it's like we don't have these pockets like for grief or like reflection or whatever because we're just supposed to get shit done. And like there's value in getting shit done for sure, but I almost wonder if the world would be a better place if like work structures were like more supportive of like having those times for like reflection or context, you know?
But I think that if we look at other work ecosystems around the globe,
Right.
like the Danish,
Yeah.
for one, I mean they're a big example. First of all, they're one of the happiest countries in the world, if not the happiest at this point. Denmark, but they have the shortest work week. They have
Yep.
the most positive, I guess, village support. I mean,
Yep.
they support each other, you know, and they have better maternity leave, and they have paternity leave, and they have,
Yep.
you know, they have health care, and you don't have to worry about it, and they have,
Yeah.
and you know, it.
Do you know what's interesting too about Denmark is they're one of the only, I think they're one of like 2 or 3 countries in the entire world where they have a literal word that can best be translated as like the state of happiness at work or the state of professional happiness, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like the US obviously doesn't have any of that, you know? So it's like, I think that's an amazing one if you think about it. It's like, just they even have a concept for it. And I know the American argument is always like, well, you know, they're like a socialist society, which like that's partially true, but it's also like two things.
They're not. They're democratic.
Right.
That's the other thing, right? I mean,
And first of all, like I was reading this article last night before I went to bed where somebody was saying like the craziest thing about American politics is that like what we define as like socialism now, like in Eisenhower, that was just like the GOP's like platform.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's just like stuff got so far apart from
40
each
years ago, that's what the Republicans wanted. Was
right. Right. And like first of all, there are Danish and like Finnish companies that make a lot of money. So it's not like you can't make money in those
to make a lot of money
countries.
by American standards, and that's
Right.
that's huge.
Yeah,
I know a
for
lot
sure.
of people. I know a few of my clients, you know, in Oslo and just that whole peninsula up there. I know that
Right.
Oslo's not in Denmark, but,
Right.
but,
Yeah.
but the whole peninsula up there, just kind of as a whole, they're very, very happy, and
Yeah,
they
for
make a
sure.
decent living by American standards.
Right. And minus that one dude whose name I forget in Norway that killed like 77 people in that spree killing.
Yeah.
They have like some of the lowest homicide rates in the world. They have no mass shootings, whatever. And like, it's just sometimes I think like just that community, like village notion of work too, where it's like, look, in any like American company, shit is going to fall apart and drop all the time. People are going to be putting new roles. That's almost normative. And it's like, because we don't have any like village community ritual around that, I'm always like, I wonder if that's why like we're so screwed up on like other continuums.
Yes.
Because it's like we spend so much time in these places, like they're going to impact how we think about the broader world, you know?
Well, and there's just not enough. There's just not enough. We're not teaching people to do this, but in societies like theirs, if someone drops out, like Ted, if you got stuck in the hospital,
Right.
I would see it as my job to step in and do your work for you.
Right, for sure. And like that's what a big I was reading this like I read that Sebastian Younger book, Tribe, like probably a month ago. And he has a section in there that like we might have talked about this before, I don't even remember, but like if you look at like the 2008 recession, like the whole course of human evolution, you would never bail out those banks or those auto dealers because they screwed all of us. Like you don't bail them out. Like if we were on Neanderthal and that happened, you would like kick those bankers out of the tribe.
Yeah, they'd be like excommunicated. Go over there, quit screwing with their ecosystem.
And like you'd literally be like, y'all are going individual, and when you run into a lion, like that's your deal. Like you're not gonna have a group to help you.
That sucks. Figure it out.
So like instead what we do now is like, well, I get the whole thing about too big to fail and the overall impact on the economy, but like sociologically it makes no sense that we even did that, right? So it's like
economically it really makes no sense too, to
right.
be fair.
Yeah, you're probably right.
If we
But like,
really want to get into it, that was just a really bad move all
right,
around. But
right, all around. But to your point, it's like, okay, there are criticisms of like those Scandinavian peninsula societies for sure. But like, if you have a baby in most of those countries, they give you a kit with like the shit that you need to have a baby, which like American
and
mothers are always
18 months to 3 years break so you can raise your kid.
right, which like American mothers are always scrambling on, right?
Yeah,
So you got that. And then like yeah, to your point, we spend a lot of time at work, and it's like, okay, if I'm out of work for whatever reason, or I have stuff like on my plate, like someone's gonna see it as their responsibility to pick that up. In like almost any American company, like I shit you not, I worked at a place once where someone's mom legitimately died. Okay. He was like in his late 40s, mom died. And there were like people grousing that he wasn't like answering emails during that period. And it's like, dude, there are just certain priorities in life that you have to put over other things, you know?
and if that had been my team, I would have said, all right, I need 5 volunteers. I need each of you to pick up 2 hours of work of his each day. Who's doing
Right.
it?
For sure. And like that would be like a logical way to manage that situation. But like in this case, like people were like allowed to get away with complaining like, oh, this dude's not answering emails. It's like, yeah, he's like burying his mom. Like there's no real like there's no context between A and B in that situation.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Right. So when I was working at the liquor store, recently when I was in Florida and I was working at the liquor store.
Yeah.
And I'm a manager making $2.50 to $4 less than the people that I manage.
Right. That's a whole nother topic right there.
Which we don't need to get into right now. I'm literally the only
Right.
female employee and blah, blah, blah. But that notwithstanding, the manager literally called me and said to me, you need to get your numbers up because your numbers are lower than your employees' numbers. So I had spent a total of 38 days in the hospital in a matter of 3 months. Of course my sales were low.
Right. You got to get those numbers up, man.
How
and that's
come nobody was helping me?
Yeah, that's another.
How come nobody was picking up and helping me?
Right, because that's not the community of it,
Right.
Unfortunately. Yeah. That's like it's just not how we roll, unfortunately, in this side of the world,
Which is horrible because we look at literally every other part of the world.
Yeah.
Literally, Ted. It's this country. It's this country specific. So much crap is this country specific. I'll have to, after the camera's off, tell you another conversation I had today about this country specific stuff and regarding testosterone and estrogen and whatever.
Specific. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I agree with you. And like, look, from a
every other society, they'll help you. They'll go, crap, you're under the weather. I'm going to not only make you chicken soup, but I'm going to make sure that your business does not go under.
Right, for sure. And I think it's like part of it is just like too individualistic in general. Like that's obviously a huge part of it that plays into it. And like it's almost like zero sum. And like you kind of see this, like this goes back to the main thing we were talking about, but you kind of see this in work and relationships where it's even like, okay, after breakups or whatever, it almost feels sometimes like, even though like mutual happiness for the two people that broke up is entirely possible, like on different tracks,
right.
It almost feels like sometimes we do that as zero sum too, where it's like the woman being happy has to come at the expense of the guy falling apart or vice versa.
Right. Well, and you're hitting it right on the head. And that's so many people in this country think everything is a zero-sum game.
Right.
And nothing is a zero-sum. Life's not a zero-sum game.
And I was like, okay, I was talking about this with like an HR vendor person like 2-3 days ago. Like he has like he does sales for like some applicant tracking system bullshit, which like we all know that stuff is garbage anyway. But like here was his point. It's like, he's like, there are like probably like close to 1 million plus companies in the world. And like all of them, when they get started doing recruiting, they're going to need a system to organize stuff, have compliance around stuff. So like there are a lot of people out there that need to buy this stuff, even if there's 70 other ATS vendors, like everybody can get theirs. It's fine. Like
Right.
the days of like executives like worrying about like market share as everything is so stupid, because it's like there's so many like startups and like solopreneurs and like business models that will need to buy whatever your business solution is. Like you can get yours and be fine, and everybody can have a good quality of life without you having like 80% market share, you know? So that feels like an outdated way of thinking that, again, like it applies to relationships where like I don't know, like, okay, I'm my immediate ex, like I don't know the quality of her life. I don't really like interact with her right now. But I know at the very beginning there were people that would ask me like, oh, do you think if you're doing better, that means like she has to fall apart or vice versa? And I'm like, that doesn't fucking make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's two different people on two different life tracks, like trying to figure out like their life post the other person, you know? Like, it's not zero sum, but to your point, like we make all this stuff zero sum that doesn't have to be.
I have so many exes that have done whatever it takes to erase any quality of life that I have during a breakup, because if they're not winning,
right,
you know, or if they are winning, so there has to be a loser, and that's a huge problem. There are situations in life where obviously, like in sports, sports is a zero-sum game. You have to declare a winner and a loser, but I don't have to lose all of my shit in order for you to keep all of your shit.
Right, for sure. It's like both people can get their own, you know? It's like entirely possible.
And it's easy because happiness is a subjective
100%. It's definitely
situation.
It's definitely not like a quantifiable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't have to, I mean, we get into a lot of that work too. Yeah, we'll see how they operate without me. It's not a zero-sum game. They're going to replace you.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing too, is like, I always wondered that, and I kind of like stopped caring as much about it as a topic, but it's like, you ever notice, okay, one place I was working, I think it was the last full-time place I was working, this lady that had literally been there 16 years left, right? And like on that Monday, like business as usual, like 16 years. So like, yes, obviously some knowledge and process and stuff left the building, but like, it's like, no, they just got somebody else. They start trying to train them. It's going to take you a long time to get to like 16 years of contextual knowledge on a role for sure. But like everybody's replaceable, man, in a work context for sure. Like if you don't think you're replaceable, that's like one of the biggest follies you can undergo as an employee, because like we are all eminently replaceable. And like right now, I think the thing that scares people is like, oh, technology going to replace us, which in many jobs that's going to happen, but like
you're still going to need humans to run the technology, and that's I mean, that's kind of huge.
But more so it's like you just got to realize that, like, I guess like we've talked about this 2 or 3 times, but like stop making work like a place that you try to derive relevance from, like personal relevance from, because it's like that shit, you'll never get it from there, because like unless you're like an amazing revenue generator, whether you work at a liquor store, a bar, a fucking mattress firm, or like Microsoft, unless you generate a lot of money, the top is never going to care that much about you. You're just a cog in the machine to them. And like, it's just a dangerous place to be in.
And don't believe that's true. Watch a movie like The Wolf of Wall Street.
Right, for sure. Or that Clooney movie, Up in the Air or whatever.
Up in the Air. Yep.
Yeah. But like, it's just like, it's also just a dangerous place to try and derive self-esteem or self-worth or personal value from a place that literally, like, if they lose like $35,000 next month, they might be like, you're gone. You know, like, I got to make that up somehow. Right. And then you're like, oh, but I tied all my relevance to this. So it's like that, I think, is maybe like the broader lesson of it. But to go back to the original thing, I would say, you and I have different experiences on the second question, where like you still communicate with your exes and I don't really, but I don't think any of mine were like catastrophic. Don't think it sounds like me that none of yours were too. So like the short answer to that question for people that watch this video, it's like it varies by the person, obviously.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, I am not friends with the last long-term ex I had. Shredded my life.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
He did whatever it took, and I still have friends that are friends with him. And
Right.
first of all, that irritates the crap out of me. But
Right.
at the same time, like, I don't talk to him.
Right.
I have no desire to talk to him.
Right.
I have no doubt that I will run into him because we live in the same city and we hang out with the same circle of people.
Right.
But he's one of the people I don't talk to. I have another one that I do talk to on a relatively regular basis. We do jobs together on occasion.
Right.
But the nature of that friendship is different, right? We actually worked on a friendship after the sexual relationship was over.
Right. So it's like,
it's a completely different dynamic.
That's also another thing. That's also another thing that I think people don't talk about enough, that I think is like a little bit weird / bizarre about the human condition. It's like, if you're talking about a romantic relationship, like long-term marriage, whatever, it's like, really, when you end it, like if you become friends in some context, like maybe it's not going to be a deep friendship at first or whatever, and I get that, but like in reality, all you've actually taken off the table is the physical component in most cases. And I feel like people don't acknowledge that enough. It's like, you're almost just saying like, okay, the emotional thing is probably not there, and I get that, but like in like, it's almost like, this is what's crazy, and I've seen this in like 2 couples. You could literally stop dating and like remain roommates because it would just be transactional. Like it would go from something that could have transformed your life to something that's just completely transactional, and you remove the physicality from it. Right. So that I always think is interesting, is like, it feels like we don't like address the fact that that's really what a breakup is at some level, you know. Obviously the emotional part is cut too, you know.
Well, and I mean we need to do shows about this.
yeah, for sure.
These are way bigger topics that and we like to talk about it. You and I talk about this kind of shit a lot anyway. But again,
yeah,
these are decisions we make. At some point you decide, am I actually friend? Like, is there enough in the way of a friendship? Do we have enough in common?
Right.
Because like when you got divorced, you guys are different people now. You don't have enough in common anymore.
Right. For sure.
My divorce might as well have been a divorce. He was my best friend for 10 years and my lover for a very short amount of time before we just couldn't be around each other anymore. And we're still very much like the same things, and we still have the same circle of friends, but there's nothing between the two of us that would give me an excuse to need to contact him for anything.
Right, for sure. And like I was saying, I think before we started taping, it's like, I have a friend at my gym who was married, got divorced around 36, he's like 51 now. His ex gets with a new guy, they get married, and like one day she calls him up and she's like, hey, I'm having issues with this new guy. I just want to like talk through it with you. And he was like, man, literally hang up your phone and call like anybody else in your phone and try to start that conversation with them, because I'm like that's not like what we're doing here, you know?
And I think that that's an unfair place to go if you haven't established a friendship, an actual friendship with that person. If you're still hanging on, or if they're still hanging on to you by some little thread, that's not an appropriate conversation to have like with them.
Right, for sure. And this is what's crazy too, is like
even years later, right? Like, I wouldn't ever think to call my ex-husband for advice. First of all, we hate each other. We would fight. There would be you know.
But then like, think about this too, from the last one that we posted as of this point. It's like that micromanagement one, and it's like, okay, it's the same shit where like in a relationship, like a relationship ends, if you're clinging to it, it's unhealthy. If you get promoted to a higher level of work and you're clinging to the work you previously did to the point that you're interfering with that new person's ability to get it done, that's also unhealthy.
Right.
So there's another parallel that just popped into my mind.
Right. Well, that's true. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly translates into relationships. If you're still doing that, then that's like if I were to go back and contact that ex, and don't get me wrong,
Right.
I've in lonely times thought, hey, I should
Right.
go ahead and text that guy
Right.
because he was always there.
Right.
But the reality is that if I do that, not only does it fuck up his ability to continue to move forward and process life without me,
Yeah.
it screws up my ability to do that as well. And it sets a precedent where I can go, oh, I can be weak. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to not be brave. It's okay to be fearful and small and scared, but don't live there. And if I was to call that guy in this particular situation and go, hey, I want you to tell me all the bad things about me because that's going to tell me why this is going wrong, which is exactly what you're looking for, right?
Right.
That's a hindrance. That's like calling an old boss and going, why did I fail at work?
Right. Yeah. The whole thing's that like both of those things are almost set up for failure, you know?
Which is, if you want growth, you can't do that.
Right. You can't. But I would also say, like, okay, it's two sides of one coin because going through breakups or failures at work is a pathway to growth, but it's not based on reconnecting with that person or that boss. It's based on, like, how you process it and, like, turn it into a form of self-awareness, you know?
Yes.
Because it's also, like, if you ever meet people in life that have been successful at everything, like, okay, they got out of college or high school and started taking a job, worked their way up, got to be successful there, dated one person, married that person, 2 kids, picket fence, all that shit. Like, I know a couple people like that. Those are typically the most boring fucking people that you'll ever meet in your life, you know?
It's true. No, it's true, yeah.
Because it's like they've never been through anything. And, like, how can you become, like, an interesting, charismatic person that, like, is cool to be around if you've, like, never been through shit at some point? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that's a huge part of it, too. I think we may have answered both of these questions. The second one is, like, obviously very contextual to person and what the relationship was like. The first one is, like, in the context of how we mostly think about friendship, no, that part probably has to end. But in the context of support or respect, that part can still exist, I think.
Well, and if we look at companies that disallows things like that, like, well, I guess that's loose. I get the military.
Right.
Officers aren't allowed to interact with outside of normal confines of business.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to interact with the people that are below them.
Right. Yeah,
and
I've heard
that's
that.
on purpose, and that's because that can be seen as favoritism. And
Yep.
but the officers they don't go out of their way to be mean to the people below them, and that's they just
Right.
They're not, and that's like I don't go out of my way to be mean to my ex.
Yeah, for sure.
That's way too much fucking work for me. And I'm not going to go out of my way to be mean to an employee should I become a manager above them.
Right.
I think that energy can be spent better in both situations.
Right.
Why not use that energy of anger towards your ex to plant trees or run 5 miles or make yourself better somehow.
Right. For sure.
I think in both situations, use that energy because there's energy that's
yeah.
If you feel like you have to treat your ex-friend, because you're going to be ex-friends, if you feel like you have to treat your ex-friend like crap, then you have the problem.
Right. Well, I think I would say, like, a good place to even end it positively for everyone involved is, like, there is energy in these moments and you should be using that energy to be positive and, like, better yourself, even if it started from a place of negativity. Because, like, theoretically, not to sound deep, but I think that's, like, the point of life, It's like, use the energy that you have in the pockets that you have it to try and do better,
Exactly.
Or, like, be more positive. So maybe that's the underlying lesson. But I also feel like we probably came up with like another 7 topics just in this shit because
we
somehow
do
we
that
spent
sometimes. We do that all the
somehow we
time.
spent like 7 minutes talking about Scandinavia in the middle of it, which I feel like when it gets posted, that's how I'm gonna tag it. Like, I think people will be interested in the X thing, but I'm also gonna be like randomly there's like a 7-minute discussion about Scandinavia and like zero-sum games in the
And
U.S. or
hooga
whatever.
and zero-sum games.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna put. We talk about we talk about whatever friends with managers, friends with exes, and somewhere in there some hooga and some zero-sum game.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff, man.
Watch it for the hooga content because it's hilarious.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Too funny.
All right, cool.
All right, so we'd established the answer is if you're a manager expecting to be friends with your employees, probably not in the same way as you would be friends with them if you were an employee with them. And if you are looking to be friends with an ex, you need to make sure that you're not doing it out of desperation or need or spite. And it actually is a friendship. Like I said, the one ex, it took us 2 years to cultivate that friendship back. I mean, we had to actually work for it. So.
Yep. All right. Gracias, man. This was a good one. And
yeah, thanks. It was.
I think it will be. I think people might actually be interested in it. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna go see if my dog is still alive.
I think you should, because suddenly I don't hear the wheezing anymore.
Yeah, no, he's in the other room, but hopefully he's good. All right.
Sweet.
I will catch you later.
All right. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.